Why do you keep talking about Democrat states and Democrat states? They're American states and American states.
Democrat-run states are the ones that are doing badly, George. If you look at New York, if you look at Illinois, if you look at a lot of different places, they're doing poorly. They have things that the Republicans don't have. So they are. I mean, I don't want to say, look, I'm the president of everybody, but I don't want to say it, but they're Democrat-run cities. It is what it is.
That subsidize the red states. But anyway, the president once again saying he doesn't want to give desperately needed aid to cities struggling because they're Democrats. First of all, not true. As we said, plenty of red states dealing with rising crime and soaring unemployment. Also, if those big cities struggle, believe me, it impacts the whole country. It's especially true when it comes to New York. The city hit hardest by COVID, now dealing with a major financial and quality of life issues because of the shutdowns. Every major city in America is dealing with similar things, but since the New York metropolitan region makes up about 10% of the entire country's economy, what happens in New York does not stay in New York. New York City seeing a surge in crime, with shootings doubling last month compared to last year and murders rising by 50%. Now, more than 170 CEOs of the largest companies, they're banding together and making a plea to Mayor de Blasio. They're also signed a letter, which I now quote from. Unprecedented numbers of New Yorkers are unemployed, facing homelessness or otherwise at risk. There's also widespread anxiety over public safety, cleanliness, and other quality of life issues that are contributing to deteriorating conditions. People will be slow to return unless their concerns about security and the livability of our communities are addressed quickly. My next guest pulled everyone together and led the charge for that letter, Kathryn Wylde, President and CEO of the Partnership for New York City. Kathryn, it's always good talking to you. From your perspective, was it avoidable, this letter? Apparently, if I remember the TikTok of this, a couple weeks earlier, the CEO of Hearst went over and thought there was a productive conversation with the mayor, then radio silence. Could this have been handled behind closed doors?
Well, I think that it's important to have a public conversation right now. The challenge we're facing in the city and the region is restoring confidence on the healthcare side, of course, but also confidence with regard to our economy coming back, people being comfortable coming back to work. Public safety has become a big issue over the summer. The safety and security of mass transit, of the commuter rail. So there are a number of issues that need public discussion and public reassurance. And the first thing we did in this letter from 164 business leaders was to say, business is committed to the city. We're committed to its future. We believe in its future, but we've all got to come together around some solutions to the immediate issues we're facing and make sure the city is safe, healthy, and that we're all going back to work to rebuild our economy together.
You know, Kathryn, it's interesting because so many people who go or went to the city every day for work haven't been back in forever. They've been working remotely, and they're getting anecdotal information. They're seeing clips here or there. There seems to be two different schools of thought. One is, hey, if you remember the city in the 80s here, we are very quickly going down that same road. And others say there's perception, there's reality. It's not as bad as people are making it out to be. Yes, the numbers are worse, but it's nowhere near as bad as people talking about like it's a scene out of Mad Max or something. Where is that reality in terms of perception, the reality of the difficulties the city's facing?
Well, having been in the city for the last 6 months, I will say that the realities and perceptions are both true. All summer long, we had fireworks all night, waking us up that we haven't had for years, that level of lawlessness. And so that made people nervous. Obviously, the fact that there has been an increase in shootings that's quite dramatic. Last week, it was up 168% in terms of shootings this year over last year. So this is not people's imagination. There are real issues here. Is the city in chaos? Is it falling apart? Is it dangerous to come here? Absolutely not. But on the other hand, do we see signs of deterioration, more graffiti, more garbage in the streets? Yes, we do. And we've got to catch that now, do something about it. We've gotten tremendous response from all members, from various members of the public, from all sectors of the public, to the letter saying, we're glad you said something. Let's deal with this now as New Yorkers.
What's the level of confidence from the folks who signed that letter? What's your level of confidence in the current mayor, Mayor de Blasio?
Well, I think we are confident in the future of the city. We do not think the mayor or city government can do this alone. And we feel that the resources of the city have not been mobilized to support what needs to be done. I was here in 1980 when we brought the city together to rebuild the neighborhoods that had burned down in the urban crisis of the 1970s. And I worked with David Rockefeller then. That's why he started the Partnership for New York City, was to bring the business community in, to bring the universities, all the institutional strength that we have in the city, to work with community development groups, to rebuild the city's neighborhoods and bring back a middle class to the city. That was a successful effort. We did the same thing after 9/11, where we all came together, organized labor leadership with business leadership, with communities, and working with state and local government. We all came together. We've got to do that again. We haven't done that yet in response to the COVID. Everybody ought to be concerned that 1 million people are out of work. People are without food. They are going to pretty soon not be able to pay the rent once the eviction moratorium expires. And we're going to have an even greater problem of homelessness if we don't get ahead of it now.
Kathryn, few people will confuse me with an apologist of Mayor de Blasio. However, revenues went off the cliff, not just for the city, but for the state. And the president, in so many words, gave the middle finger to both the state and the city. And he made it clear he looks at things in blue states and red states, talked about mismanagement, et cetera. I know some of the same people have now asked the president to get involved. To me, it's almost squeamish to have to grovel when he should be doing the right thing. But that said, doesn't Washington have to be not just part of, but the main part of the solution here, since they're the only ones who can basically print the money here to get states like New York and others, obviously, back on its feet?
Yes, we do need support from Washington, absolutely. Our region is 9% of the national economy, and how we go, the country goes. So they ought to be paying attention to that. Absolutely agree. But Washington is not going to save us if we don't have a clear plan, a clear strategy, if we're not united and working together to put people back to work, to reopen our small businesses, to take care of some of our affordability and longstanding infrastructure issues. We've got to be doing that locally as well. And for the last few years, we've been spending more time on ideological arguments against each other than trying to pull that together.
Finally, the letter closed out by the assembled CEOs and business leaders saying, we look forward to your response and to partnering with you with a shared commitment to bringing the city back. Is the partnership just ideas, or a lot of these CEOs willing to put their money where their mouth is? Because they're some of the few who can afford it, to make sure if the city's tight on money, they might come up with some money to better improve not only safety but quality of life. What should people look to for the same people who signed this letter to do their part, more than asking the mayor to get off of his you-know-what?
Well, the business leadership of the city, which is very diverse, very broad-based, is absolutely committed to the future of the city and committed to those who are most impacted by the COVID. It struck our Black and brown communities in particular, our small businesses, half of which are first-generation immigrant-owned, many of them minority-owned, that are suffering hugely from this. They've made major contributions, everything from when the COVID struck and the city and the hospitals were stuck with no masks, no equipment to protect the medical staff. The companies had disaster plans, and they had storage places out in the Midwest somewhere, and they brought in millions of masks and equipment and ventilators to support the system before we had the capacity to get those here. And so huge philanthropic contributions throughout, including support for those who were undocumented, who could not get eligibility to unemployment insurance or the federal aid. But we need a plan. We want to be at the table. We want to help develop a solid recovery strategy.
Kathryn Wylde, I always appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Richard. Nice to see you.
Up next, we put a human face on COVID and speak with a woman who caught the virus in March and still struggling with complications as we speak.